I think it's changing. That's the main thing. And so is the music change. The flute plays what the lead vocal would do. Let's say the public, they're coming to listen to what you're playing and not just to look at you and see what you are.
When John Bonham sat behind the drums, it was no longer an instrument. It was a storm, a violent storm with rhythm, with weight, with soul, and utterly inimitable. Every strike of his sticks was like thunder ripping through the skies of rock and roll, wild yet chillingly precise. But behind that rhythmic machine was no man of steel. He was flesh and blood, with all the yearning, the wounds, the loneliness, and the inner battles that no one could see from the audience. As the legendary drummer of Led Zeppelin, one of the greatest bands of all time, John Bonham didn't just keep time for a generation of music. He forever changed how the world perceived a drummer. He didn't need to stand in the spotlight, because with just a stomp of his foot or a flick of his sticks, he became the spotlight. No one played the drums like he did, and no one lived like he did. Powerful, instinctive, all in, and then gone like a whirlwind at just 32 years old. The story of John Bonham is not merely the glorious rise of a musical genius, but also the tragedy of a soul left unguarded in the eye of fame's storm. He was worshipped, worn down, and then vanished, leaving behind a void that can never be filled. So what made John Bonham? How did a boy who built his first drums out of tin cans become the driving force behind the sound of an entire era? Let's trace each thunderous beat back to where it all began, a quiet childhood in Worcestershire. Don't forget to click like and subscribe so you won't miss the stories of music legends whose legacies live on. Early life. John Henry Bonham was born on May 31st, 1948 in Redditch, a small industrial town in Worcestershire in the heart of England. His family came from working-class roots. His father ran a small construction business, and his mother was a gentle, traditional homemaker. They weren't wealthy, and no one in the family had any ties to music. But early on, in the tiny kitchen filled with the clattering of pots and pans, something began to stir, wild, insistent, and impossible to extinguish. At age 5, John started banging on tin cans with spoons to play drums. When he received his first real drum, a beat-up snare drum from a second-hand shop, he clung to it all day like it was treasure. With no teacher, no music school, Bonham taught himself by listening to recordings of jazz legends like Gene Krupa, Buddy Rich, and Max Roach. He learned by ear, by sight, by instinct, and above all, through an unshakable passion. However, in school, John was a terrible student. He disliked academic subjects, was constantly scolded, got poor grades, and was labeled undisciplined by teachers. In a moment of frustration, one teacher even said straight to his face, "You'll never amount to anything except banging on drums." What might have been an insult to others became a life motto for Bonham. He would bang on drums, but in a way that made the whole world take notice. Leaving school at 16, Bonham went to work for his father's construction company, doing manual labor by day, driving a digger, and playing drums for local bands at night. The grueling work routine accidentally built up his incredible stamina, later becoming his advantage in performing marathon drum solos without tiring. In a world where most drummers learned from books or classrooms, Bonham came from somewhere else, from grit, from sweat, and from a will that refused to quit. No one at the time believed that this construction worker who drummed at night would become a legend. But there was one thing that neither poverty nor prejudice could silence: the sound of drums pulsing in his blood, urging Bonham forward. And that very sound, in the years to come, would become the heartbeat of Led Zeppelin. Early career. Before the name John Bonham became inseparable from Led Zeppelin and entered the realm of legend, he was just a determined drummer knocking on the doors of every bar and tiny stage across the Midlands. These were the years without stage lights, without roaring fans, only sweat, the sound of drums, and a dream that hadn't yet found its name. Bonham began playing with local bands at the age of 15, first with Terry Webb and the Spiders, then the Nicky James movement, and A Way of Life, rock and soul groups popular at the time. Though still unknown to the wider world, Bonham quickly made an impression with his thunderous power, fearsome intensity, and an unpredictable style no one could prepare for. Once, he was fired simply because he played too loud, shaking the whole stage. But Bonham refused to change. He didn't drum to please anyone. In 1967, he joined a band called Band of Joy alongside a young singer named Robert Plant, whose voice was fierce and untamed. The group didn't last long, but the combination of Plant's soaring vocals and Bonham's drumming left a lasting mark, not just on each other, but on anyone searching for something new in rock. In the summer of 1968, when the band the Yardbirds disbanded, guitar virtuoso Jimmy Page began planning a new group, bolder, heavier, and unlike anything else around. He quickly recruited John Paul Jones, bass keyboard, a veteran session musician, and was introduced to Robert Plant as the lead singer. But Plant's fiery voice would only work with a drummer who could match it, and Plant had only one name in mind: John Bonham. At the time, Bonham was touring the UK with American folk rock artist Tim Rose. Though not yet famous, he was already a sought-after drummer, having received offers from the likes of Joe Cocker and Chris Farlow. But Jimmy Page knew Bonham was the only one who could launch his new project into the stratosphere. The problem was, Bonham wasn't easy to convince. His wife, Pat, was pregnant at the time and didn't want her husband diving deeper into the unstable life of a touring musician. Bonham, deeply rooted in family and home, hesitated. In August 1968, Bonham finally joined the group, then still called the New Yardbirds, to fulfill a few remaining tour obligations. After a short stint in Scandinavia, the band entered the studio to record their debut album. In just 30 hours of intense work, they completed Led Zeppelin I, an unspoken manifesto of a new sound, heavier than blues, wilder than rock, and ferocious like a storm. After the tour, the group officially changed its name to Led Zeppelin, a nod to a joke by Keith Moon, The Who once quipped that Page's band would go down like a lead balloon. But instead of crashing, the balloon took flight. And in the cockpit, Bonham sat, not just as the drummer, but as the engine igniting the entire sky of rock and roll. From a boy who never had formal music training, who once got kicked out of a band for being too loud, John Bonham had stepped into the doorway of history. Not by theory, not by luck, but by instinct, determination, and his own two hands. And from that moment on, rock would never sound the same without his drums. Career success. Led Zeppelin didn't just succeed, they exploded, dominated, and forever altered the map of global music. And at the heart of that seismic shift was John Bonham, not merely the band's timekeeper, but the man who redefined what a drummer could be in a rock group. He didn't play to stay in the background. He played as if the entire stage was under his feet. From their debut album, Led Zeppelin I, 1969, Bonham already had critics stunned. On the opening track, Good Times, Bad Times, he used a right-foot bass drum triplet technique that few drummers at the time could pull off. And astonishingly, he did it with just one pedal. People couldn't believe such a thunderous sound came from a single man. From that moment on, each Zeppelin album was a leap in creativity, with Bonham's drumming acting as the glue that held every sonic experiment together. On Whole Lotta Love, he didn't just drum, he commanded the atmosphere. On When the Levee Breaks, his drums were recorded in the stairwell of Headley Grange, echoing like thunder slamming into the earth. On Kashmir, he held a steady beat beneath Eastern instruments, strings, and a complex structure. And on Black Dog, he played with offbeat, unconventional rhythms, yet still made listeners nod their heads involuntarily. But the pinnacle of his technical mastery, and his most iconic moment, was Moby Dick. This wasn't just a song, it was Bonham's personal domain. After a brief guitar intro, he launched into a drum solo, First just a few minutes, but during live performances it could stretch beyond 20 minutes, even 30. He would use his bare hands, striking the drums like a boxer throwing punches, yet never losing the beat. Each performance was a storm, and people didn't come to Zeppelin shows just to hear Plant sing or Page solo. They came to witness Bonham battle his drum kit like he was fighting to save his soul. Beyond the stage, Bonham was also the rhythmic brain in the studio. He often invented his own patterns and proposed groundbreaking ideas for recording drums, from using distant mics to choosing rooms with special acoustics. Producer Glyn Johns once said, "Bonham wasn't just a drummer, he was a man who painted the space where the music could live." In a world where drums were often seen as the silent foundation, Bonham turned them into the emotional core. He didn't show off. He didn't need to be faster than anyone. But every beat he played carried the weight of a statement. I'm here. I am the heartbeat of this band. From Led Zeppelin I to In Through the Outdoor, 1979, through countless sold-out stadium tours, John Bonham became the living embodiment of the 20th century drummer. No need for flashy outfits. No need to stand up to be honored. Just 2 feet, 2 hands, and a soul that never faked a thing. And at that peak, though always quiet backstage, Bonham made one truth unmistakably clear. Without Bonham, Led Zeppelin would not exist as we know it. Downfall and the dark corners. John Bonham was a genius, but also a troubled soul, always teetering on the edge of collapse behind the stage lights. When his hands struck the drums like thunder, people mistook it for strength. But in truth, it was how he released loneliness, depression, and an addiction he couldn't control. Behind the blazing performances was a string of crises, scandals, and hidden struggles that stretched until the day he was gone. Even in the early days with Led Zeppelin, Bonham was already known for his heavy drinking. He didn't just drink for fun. He drank to escape the pressure, to sleep, to fight off the endless exhaustion from relentless touring across Europe and North America. When sober, he was quiet, respectful, and deeply devoted to his family. But when drunk, he became someone else, easily enraged, aggressive, and at times destructive. Many of Led Zeppelin's backstage scandals bore Bonham's mark, either directly or indirectly. Once, he exploded in fury just because the stage lights hit at the wrong moment during his drum solo, then screamed, smashed things, and even threatened to kill a crew member. On another occasion, he got into a physical fight with a hotel manager after being told to quiet down in the middle of the night. But the most serious incident happened in 1977 during a tour stop in Oakland, California. That day, Led Zeppelin had a show at Alameda County Coliseum. Behind the scenes, a fight broke out between the band's entourage and local security staff. Those involved included manager Peter Grant, bodyguard John Bindon, Grant's son, and Bonham himself. A crew member was hospitalized, and police stepped in immediately. Bonham was detained for questioning along with others. The case didn't go to court, but the band paid a large settlement to resolve it. It became one of the biggest controversies in Zeppelin's history and severely damaged their relationship with American concert promoters. By the late 1970s, Bonham had sunk deeper into depression. Though surrounded by glory, he felt drained, disconnected from himself and from his family. He told friends outright that he wanted to quit the band. He hated touring, hated living in hotels, hated feeling like a cog in a money-making machine. But he didn't know how to stop. Rumors circulated that Bonham had smashed dressing rooms, refused to go on stage at the last minute, or vanished before a show, forcing the band to delay performances. Jimmy Page later admitted, "John was being worn down by the very schedule we had created." But in the rock and roll world of the 70s, no one thought about mental health care. They only thought about the next show. Bonham's death, officially ruled an accident due to alcohol poisoning, has long been shrouded in suspicion. Some believe it was an act of unacknowledged self-destruction. Others say Bonham had been crying out for help for a long time, but no one was listening. and some bitterly suggest Led Zeppelin should have stopped sooner, while Bonham was still alive. Behind the drumsticks was a man slowly burning from the inside, but no one saw it, or perhaps no one wanted to see, because the world only listened to his drums, not the silent cries for help behind them. And that was the greatest tragedy of John Bonham's life. Not that he died too soon, but that he was abandoned long before his time. Death and the disbandment of Led Zeppelin. On September 25, 1980, the rock world was shaken. John Bonham, the brilliant drummer, the irreplaceable heartbeat of Led Zeppelin, was found dead at Jimmy Page's home in Windsor. He was only 32 years old. No car crash, no drugs, just alcohol, and a night's sleep from which he never woke up. The day before, on the morning of September 24th, Bonham woke early to prepare for a rehearsal with the band. They were getting ready for an upcoming U.S. tour, set to begin in October, their first in 3 years. On the way to the studio, Bonham began drinking. Not just a few drinks, dozens of shots of vodka. Close friends and assistants later said he consumed at least 40 small shots of vodka in less than 24 hours. No one intervened. Everyone had grown too used to Bonham's drinking. It was almost just another day in Zeppelin. That night, he stayed over at Jimmy Page's house. When everyone went to bed, Bonham lay down on the sofa, completely intoxicated. By the next morning, when tour manager Benji Lefebvre and John Paul Jones went to wake him, they found he had stopped breathing. He had died in his sleep, having choked on his own vomit while unconscious from alcohol. The news spread like a thunderclap. A legend had fallen, but for Led Zeppelin, his death was more than a personal loss. It was the end. Not long after, on December 4th, 1980, the band issued a short official statement. "We wish it to be known that the loss of our dear friend and the deep sense of undivided harmony felt by ourselves and our manager have led us to decide that we could not continue as we were. No press conference, no farewell tour, no replacement plans, just one quiet admission. Without Bonham, Led Zeppelin could not exist." To many, Bonham's death marked the final blow that ended the golden age of classic rock. After Keith Moon, The Who died in 1978, now it was Bonham, the two most iconic drummers of that wild era, both lost to the destruction that came from within. But unlike Moon, Bonham didn't seek the spotlight, didn't live to rebel. He simply didn't know how to stop. And no one around him had ever taught him how to slow down. His funeral was held in his hometown of Rushock, Worcestershire, attended by friends, fellow musicians, and thousands of fans. He was cremated, and his ashes laid to rest in the family plot. At the funeral, Robert Plant couldn't speak a word. Jimmy Page stood frozen like a statue. John Paul Jones later recalled, "That was the day my entire musical world collapsed." Led Zeppelin disbanded. But the real heartbreak wasn't losing a band. It was losing the one person who could make their music pulse like a living heartbeat. No one ever played drums like Bonham, and no one has ever replaced him. Since then, every Led Zeppelin reunion has only happened under special circumstances, with his son, Jason Bonham, sitting behind the drum kit. But even when Jason played, both the band and the audience understood. It wasn't a comeback. It was a tribute. A candle lit for the departed. Because from the moment John Bonham took his last breath, Led Zeppelin was no longer Led Zeppelin. Personal life? Behind the storm, named John Bonham was a man who loved his wife, cherished his children, and longed for a peaceful home, completely at odds with the fiery image he projected on stage. In the chaotic world of rock and roll, he wasn't one for parties, women, or chasing attention. He was rough around the edges, quiet, introverted, and always preferred returning to Rushock with his family over staying in the spotlight of Los Angeles. In 1966, at just 18 years old, Bonham married Pat Phillips, a modest, private Englishwoman. Their marriage lasted until his death. No scandals, no tabloids, no media drama. But behind that enduring bond were many challenges. and a deep sense of loneliness. Pat often begged John to step away from the touring life. When Robert Plant invited him to join Led Zeppelin, she strongly opposed it, fearing the gentleman she knew would be swept away by the same rock lifestyle that had destroyed countless artists. Bonham hesitated, but eventually said yes, for the music, and for the belief that he could balance both worlds. But reality proved otherwise. They had 2 children together, Jason Bonham, born 1966, and Zoe Bonham, born 1975. Jason, in particular, was closest to his father and deeply influenced by him. As a child, Jason often sat behind the stage, watching his father's every beat. The 2 frequently played drums together, and Jason eventually followed in his father's footsteps, becoming a professional drummer. He would go on to perform with legends like Jimmy Page, Foreigner, and even in the 2007 Led Zeppelin reunion. Jason once said, "I didn't just want to play like him, I wanted to understand why he played that way." In contrast, Bonham's relationship with his daughter Zoe remains less known. Some relatives revealed that he didn't spend much time with her, partly due to constant touring during her early years, and partly because Bonham himself carried a deep guilt about his absence from the family. In his final years, he spent more time at home, trying to make up for the lost moments, but he never felt it was enough. Later, Zoe also pursued a musical path. She sings, writes songs, and holds a quiet space in her life for the memory of a father she didn't get to truly know. Bonham loved rural life. He raised horses, collected vintage cars, and often drove his Jaguar through the fields of Worcestershire. Though he earned millions from touring, he didn't live extravagantly. To friends, he was honest, soft-spoken, humorous, and fiercely loyal. He disliked crowds, wasn't good at interviews, and usually avoided the press whenever he could. But Bonham's fatal weakness was alcohol, a constant companion that became part of his existence. At first, it was a coping mechanism to ease the anxiety of being away from his wife and children. Later, it became a mental trap he couldn't escape. And the tragic truth was, no matter how many times he promised to change, he always relapsed. Pat knew. Jason knew. The whole band knew. But no one could pull him out of that downward spiral. John Bonham's private life had no major scandals, no public affairs, no domestic violence. But it carried a quiet sorrow. A husband who wanted to stay home but always had to leave. A father who loved his children but couldn't be around long enough. A gentleman forced to live in a world where only aggression was glorified. And the bitterest part of all, he had everything: fame, fortune, family, love, but couldn't hold on to them all at once. He chose music, and the price he paid was himself. Legacy and influence. John Bonham didn't just leave an irreplaceable void in Led Zeppelin, he left behind a new standard for the art of drumming in modern music. When he died, the world didn't just mourn a man, it mourned a heartbeat that could never be copied, never replaced. Throughout more than a decade with Led Zeppelin, Bonham redrew the role of the drummer. Before him, drums were background, pushed to the rear to let the spotlight shine on singers or lead guitarists. But with Bonham, the drums became the center, the spine of the song, the vessel for every emotion, from rage and passion to despair. He didn't just play drums, he told stories with them. Music magazines and experts alike agree on one thing: Bonham is the greatest drummer of all time. Rolling Stone ranked him #1 on its list of the 100 greatest drummers, 2016. Modern Drummer, Loudwire, and numerous other rock publications echoed the same sentiment Dave Grohl, Nirvana Foo Fighters, once said: "Bonham is the reason I learned to play drums. No one has done it like he did, and no one should try." Neil Peart, Rush, Chad Smith, Red Hot Chili Peppers, Mike Portnoy, Dream Theater, all called him the supreme high priest of rock rhythm. One reason Bonham's sound remains so unique is how he combined overwhelming power with astonishing finesse. He could shake an entire stadium with a single bass drum hit, but also play as softly as a breath during transitions. He was the first to make drums sing. Every solo had a theme, a climax, a pause, and a final explosion. Beyond his individual talent, Bonham also left a lasting legacy in recording technology and live performance. Drum tracks in When the Levee Breaks and In My Time of Dying are still considered acoustic benchmarks today, sampled hundreds of times by hip-hop, electronic, and pop artists. His recording method, using distant mics and rooms with natural reverb, helped pioneer modern studio techniques. In spirit, Bonham stood as a symbol of loyalty and total dedication. During the entire lifespan of Led Zeppelin, he never once considered leaving or starting a solo career. To him, music wasn't about fame, it was about responsibility and belief in something greater than himself. After his passing, Led Zeppelin refused all offers to replace him, whether for tours, albums, or reunions. Not because no one could play like Bonham, but because the soul of Zeppelin couldn't exist without him. In 1995, Bonham was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame along with Led Zeppelin. More than a decade later, in 2007, the band reunited for a single concert at London's O2 Arena, with Jason Bonham, his son, behind the drums. It wasn't a replacement, it was a passing of the torch, a tribute concert, and the whole world understood. John Bonham still lived, through every beat his son played, through every strike on a snare that tried to echo that long-lost thunder. Bonham didn't leave behind hundreds of solo albums. He didn't get caught up in scandals. He didn't make grand speeches. He left only his drumming, and that was enough to build a legend. Because in music, some people don't need to say a single word, and John Bonham was the loudest silence the world of rock has ever known. John Bonham didn't live long, but he lived loud. In those short 32 years, he never needed to argue how good he was, never wrote books, never stood in front of a microphone to lecture about the philosophy of music. He let his hands do the talking, and those hands pounded out drum beats that changed the course of music history. Without Bonham, Led Zeppelin would still have been a great band. But with Bonham, they became immortal. It was his drumming that kept everything grounded, from Page's wild guitar runs to Plant's primal screams, preventing it all from descending into chaos. He didn't need to stand front and center to be seen. The audience could feel him. From each bass drum hit that landed like a punch to the chest, to the brief silences that made everyone hold their breath. His death was a deep wound in the heart of music, not just because he left too soon, but because he left right when Led Zeppelin was at its peak. But perhaps, true to how he lived, intensely, without half measures, Bonham also left this world without a goodbye. Like a drum beat that stops suddenly in the middle of a crescendo, leaving silence and a memory that never fades. John Bonham is the living definition of the saying, "You don't play music to prove anything, you play to feel alive." And he did, one beat at a time. So, what moved you most about John Bonham's fierce yet deeply emotional journey? Which moment made his drumming unforgettable for you? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to hit like and subscribe to keep exploring the stories of music legends who wrote history straight from the heart.